Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, your boy Orban Cast, aka Vinesh, back here with another brand new video, and I hope you guys are having a great day. So, we are here for the Zandvoort or the Dutch Grand Prix race review. So, without any further ado, let's get right into the video, guys. So, we're starting off with the Zandvoort weather and the weekend itself. Well, what a weekend, man. I mean, this has probably been the most entertaining and chaotic race that we had, barring the Australian Grand Prix. And it was just completely entertaining to watch right from Friday, the FP1 to the last lap or even the last turn of last lap on race day on Sunday. So it was overall a very fun and an entertaining weekend, and got to say, this has to be one of the top 5 most entertaining races that we've had this season so far. I mean, with the kind of weather changes and with how much the drivers swapped positions in the race, it was just brilliant to witness. It wasn't as wet weather kind of a session as it was in Spa. In Spa, it was pretty much impossible to race in the rain, but here at Zandvoort, it did rain. But the thing is that the track quickly dried to a point where the inters was getting faster and faster, to a point where in qualifying towards the end, it was pretty much a gamble between whether the softs would be faster as a tire, or should the driver stick with the intermediates. So with the weekend being that unpredictable and interesting, it really put me on the edge of my seat. And I have to say, this Grand Prix has to be one of the most entertaining ones for me to watch. And we pretty much had everything from virtual safety car to full force safety car to red flags, with the teams using all the tire compounds, soft, medium, hard, intermediates to full extreme wet weather tires. So yes, I will give this one a 10 on 10 in terms of the kind of weather and the entertainment value. I'll give this Dutch Grand Prix a 10 on 10. So starting off with Charles Leclerc, well, he had plenty of lockups into turn 1 during the free practice sessions and even during the qualifying session. Thankfully, it did not happen to him on the main race, but the problem is that he suffered underflow damage, I think, at lap 1, which completely cost his race, and he eventually DNF'd from the race. And moving on to Sergio Perez, well, it was kind of a topsy-turvy kind of a weekend for him. He had a pretty rough qualifying yet again, because the mixer 2, the wet weather condition, is not really his strongest suit, and he was constantly a second off pace to his teammate Max Verstappen on 1 lap pace. He qualified P7 for the race, with a brilliant strategical call that he made with the team on lap 1 to box for the intermediates. It put him in a prime position where he took the lead of the race and had a very healthy lead over the second place driver, who was Guan Yu Zhou. I think it was around 15 seconds. So he was running pretty comfortably, but then Max switched to the intermediates. I think he dropped down to P6, and then he fought his way through the field, and he was immediately 3 to 4 seconds quicker per lap than Sergio Perez, and he quickly caught up to Sergio. And with, I think, the gap being somewhere between 3 seconds, the track condition actually moved on to the dry tire condition, and Max boxed first and undercut Sergio Perez, took the lead, and pretty much he stayed there to the end of the race. So it was a flawless weekend from Max Verstappen, but can't be said the same about Sergio Perez. But the thing is that he could have finished P2. He was very comfortably holding on to the second place over Fernando Alonso, who was running third towards the end of the race. And even when the drivers switched on to the intermediates for the second time when it started raining towards the end of the race, Sergio Perez was comfortably in a 5-second gap to Fernando Alonso. So I feel like even without pushing, he would have easily finished the race second. And with the lockup going into turn 1, as the track got really wet, that even the intermediates was the wrong tire, it was the extreme wets, he locked up, he went deep into the turn 1, took the runoff, hit the barrier with his rear wing. He came into the pits steaming, and as I said, the track was not even in the intermediates condition, it was on full-on wet condition. He locked up. I feel like he skated his way into the pits, hit the pit wall, and was not a clean weekend from him. And with the speeding penalty that he took by skating into the pit lane, he crossed the finish line third, and he got dropped down to P4 with his 5-second penalty for speeding into the pit lane. So yes, kind of a topsy-turvy weekend for Sergio Perez. I feel like this should have been a weekend where he should have absolutely comfortably finished second, if not third. The fact that he finished fourth is kind of not so good, and considering what Helmut Marko had said at the start of the weekend, which is they are not too sure about whether Sergio Perez will be continuing with the team for next year. It really adds some pressure on Sergio Perez. So let's see what he does as we progress through the rest of the season. The objective that the team has set for him is to finish second in the Drivers' Championship, so Red Bull can have their first ever 1-2 in the Drivers' standings. It's kind of crazy that despite having such dominant cars over the years, during Sebastian Vettel era and even now during the Max Verstappen era, Red Bull has never had a proper 1-2 with their drivers in the Drivers' Championship. So that's their objective, is to get Sergio Perez to finish second in the Drivers' Championship. I feel like if he actually bottles it and finishes third, I'm pretty sure that Red Bull would be looking elsewhere, probably to Daniel Ricciardo to take Sergio Perez's seat for 2024, and put Liam Lawson probably in the Alfa Tauri seat. So let's see what happens with Sergio Perez, as his future is dangling on a fine thread. So moving on to Max Verstappen, like I said, it was a very flawless weekend from him. He pretty much led, I feel like, all of the race, and even when the nature threw so many curveballs at him, he managed to hit all those balls to the boundary and score the maximum points. And I feel like this race win and this 9th consecutive win is not something that's going to stop him here. I feel like he would easily run to the end of the season with winning all the race. I just have lost all hopes that Red Bull would fall off the pace, as the competitors still have not really caught up to the Red Bulls. So yeah, my optimism has really dropped down by 5 notches. So let's see what happens. Let's see if the universe can prove me wrong on this. So moving on to Carlos Sainz. Well, he had a pretty, a decent race. This is not what I expected from Ferrari coming into the Dutch Grand Prix. I expected for them to make a decent leap forward to close their gap to the Red Bulls, but honestly, qualifying P6 with Carlos Sainz and finishing the race P5, and considering that his teammate Charles Leclerc qualified P9 and had to retire from the race after picking up damage at lap 1, if I'm not wrong, underflow damage, which made him fall down the grid order, and eventually the team just decided to retire him from the race. So yeah, not a good weekend from Ferrari. I genuinely expect for them to make a leap forward heading into the Monza Grand Prix, which is also their home race. So let's see if that home race energy and the positivity that the Tifosi would bring in to the Monza Grand Prix will help them secure probably a top 3 finish at Monza. So moving on to Gasly. Well, what to say, a brilliant weekend from him. He finished third in the sprint race at Spa, and he finished third here at the Dutch Grand Prix after getting promoted as Sergio Perez got demoted with his 5-second penalty. He finished 4th on track, and he got promoted up to P3 after Sergio Perez's penalty was applied. So it was a brilliant weekend, and definitely a result that the Alpine team definitely needs after what they have been going through with the huge shuffle that's been happening up top at the administration range. So this has to be a huge motivation for the team to work hard and to probably make a better car for the next season. It's a huge ray of positivity and hope shedding into the Alpine camp. Esteban Ocon qualified P17, not his best qualifying, and he managed to finish the race P9. So a good one, but I feel like there was probably still a bit more left on the table, considering where Pierre Gasly managed to finish the race, considering he himself started 12th. So now moving on to Aston Martin. Well, Fernando Alonso, the relentless opportunist, he was running third comfortably after qualifying I think 5th for the race. He made some huge moves on turn 1, which put him on a prime position at the top 3, and he boxed with Max Verstappen, if I'm not wrong. So considering he was running 3rd, with Sergio Perez making that mistake when the rain started to shower the second time towards the end of the race, he managed to pick up the 2nd place from Sergio Perez's mistake, and he pretty much held his position from there on towards the end. So a flawless weekend from Fernando Alonso, and he actually managed to pump in the fast lap. So he picked up 19 points, which is going to really help him in the Drivers' Championship to close his gap and extend his gap to Lewis Hamilton and close his gap to Sergio Perez, who only scored 12 points out of this weekend. Well, can't be said the same about his teammate Lance Stroll, who was running the very similar upgrade package. Aston Martin had brought in a new flow for the Dutch Grand Prix, and it seemed to really be working with Fernando Alonso's pace. It is very much right up there. But Lance Stroll, he qualified P11 and he finished the race P11, if I'm not wrong. So he did not make any positions in the race. Despite the kind of chaos that we had in the race, I feel like there was an opportunity for pretty much all the teams to score some good load of points if they had actually got the strategy right, and if the driver really had the confidence to push the car, considering the kind of circumstances and the situation that we were at. And yes, a bittersweet weekend for Aston Martin, as I feel like if Lance Stroll had qualified well, or if he had a good race under him, I feel like at least a P7 or a P6 finish for him was on the cards, and that would have really helped Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship in their pursuit to close their gap to the Mercedes. And right now, Fernando Alonso is single-handedly carrying Aston Martin on his back to at least hold on to P3 in the Constructors. I feel like Lance Stroll is really being the limiting factor for the team right now in scoring good points and finishing on a good place towards the end of the season. So moving on to McLaren, well, it was pretty much a clown show from them. I feel like they should have boxed when it started raining. They should have at least boxed one of their cars, pitted for intermediates with Oscar Piastri or with Lando Norris. I think they let them hang out for a very long time in the dry compound on wet track. That really compromised their race all through the weekend. And considering they qualified, I think P2 with Lando Norris and P8 with Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris finished the race P7 and Oscar Piastri finished the race P9. I feel like there was a lot more left on the table, and it was just a massive bottle job from them. And I just feel like this was yet another race for McLaren to forget. I feel like this should have been a weekend in which they should have scored a handful of points, and it's definitely a huge missed opportunity for the team. So moving on to Williams, well, it's a bittersweet weekend for them because, on one side of the garage with Alexander Albon putting up a great show for the team, making the team look really good in front of the media, which will help Williams to gain some sponsors heading into the next season or even into the next couple of seasons. Logan Sargent, on the other hand, he seemed to have pretty similar pace to Alex Albon, but the thing is that he crashed out in qualifying. As he got into Q3. I don't exactly remember whether it was on a push lap or on a cool down lap. I think it was on a cool down lap. So yeah, it was just a huge missed opportunity. I feel like, considering Alexander Albon managed to qualify P4, I think P7 or P6 was definitely on the cards for Logan Sargent if he had executed the qualifying run right. And considering he also crashed in the race at lap 14, I think it was at the exact same place where he crashed in the qualifying. So it's not a good look for Logan Sargent. I really hope he does something to pick up his pace or his form, because it's not looking good for him. And considering that there is competition and pressure for that seat that he's in for the next season, he should really pick up his pace and put up some strong performance to cement his position in the team. On the other hand, with Alex Albon, I feel like if Williams had boxed Alex when the rain started coming down at lap 1, I feel like they could have held on to P5. I still feel like they should have finished P6 or P7. I think the strategy was a bit of a fumble, which costed them a handful of position. It demoted Alex Albon from P4 all the way down to P8. Considering Williams finishing P8 is still a good place for them to finish, a good handful of points that they had collected out of this weekend. But I feel like this is a good problem to have for Williams, considering that Alex was a bit disappointed with P8 on a Williams. I mean, just think about it. Last year, they were pretty much nowhere last year. And considering they made some huge strides this year, and for them to be disappointed about finishing P8 is a good sign of improvement. And I hope that Williams stays on track, stays on this form, and continues to develop their car for next season, even to at least start off next season where they are right now, so that they can build on it as the season progresses next year. Moving on to Alfa Tauri. Well, on FP2, Daniel Ricciardo crashed into turn 3, which broke his hand, and he had to go for surgery. So Liam Lawson was the driver to step in as his stand-in driver, and he did put up a good show. I mean, the qualifying was not the strongest, considering that he only had FP3 to get used to the car, get used to the track. He put up a good performance. Starting dead last, he managed to finish the race P13 ahead of his teammate. I don't know how that even happened, but considering that he started P19 and managed to finish the race P13 ahead of his teammate again is a good result, and he has put up a good show for the team. He has put up a good show for himself, which would have easily put him on the radar for the teams who are looking for a good quality driver to replace one of their drivers who are being a weak link for the team. So Liam Lawson, a good weekend from him. Can't say the same about Yuki Tsunoda, considering he started P17 with 3 cars retiring from the race. He finished P15. So not a good run of form for him, and considering he's coming off of a good result at Spa, there is pressure on him, considering there has been 2 drivers who have stepped in and pulled out a race result that is better than his, with Daniel Ricciardo finishing higher than him in Hungary, and with Liam Lawson stepping in his first race and finishing ahead of him in P13. There is definitely pressure for him. So let's see what happens at Alfa Tauri for next year. So moving on to Mercedes. Well, what do I say? What a colossal bottle job from them. I mean, this is obviously a one-off, because it's very rare that we see Mercedes making such mistakes with their strategy. But I feel like they just relied too much on their radar and not listened to their drivers, considering Lewis Hamilton qualified P13 and George Russell qualified P3 for the race. With them not boxing the car at the right time for the intermediates, it pretty much put them right at the back of the grid, and both the drivers had to fight their way up the field to finish P6, with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell having to retire from the race at lap 72 at the last lap due to puncture. And before that puncture, George Russell was, I think he was running somewhere in the region of P6, P7. So Mercedes definitely had the pace this weekend, and if they had actually executed a good strategy with both the drivers, they should have been in the top 5, or at least in the fight for top 3 positions. So it was a huge bottle job from them. They could have pulled out a brilliant result out of this weekend with both the drivers. It is definitely a damage control kind of a weekend for the team, and it's something for them to learn and hopefully, not make the mistake again when a similar situation rises in the future. So moving on to Haas. Well, they had a handful of crash with both their drivers, considering they brought a new upgrade for their car with the front wing. Both the drivers managed to damage the front wing, and you could really see the team principal Gunther Steiner being really stressed out because there was a part deficit. So it was kind of stressful, and I could understand, because I did play the F1 manager, and when my drivers crash with me having very minimal parts in hand, it was not a good feeling. So I could understand what he was probably going through. With Haas, both the drivers qualified P15 and P18. Nico Hülkenberg, as usual, managed to outqualify his teammate. Haas really executed a good strategy, which propelled both the drivers up the field. Kevin Magnussen was at one point running in the points, but got dropped down to P16. And Nico Hülkenberg managed to finish P12 after starting P15. And considering the kind of chaos that we had in the race, it's a good result for them. And moving on to the last and final thing that I want to touch on, which is Alfa Romeo. Well, they've got no pace, man. Guan Yu Zhou qualified P16 ahead of his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who qualified P19. And both the drivers finished with Zhou Guan Yu retiring from the race after he crashed out at lap 62 when the rain really started to barrel down for the second time. And Valtteri Bottas managed to finish the race P14 with only 16 cars running on track. So Alfa Romeo really needs to do something with Audi buying the team. I really hope they have a good plan in hand to, make some huge progress in the team before Audi enters the sport in 2026. So yes guys, that would be the Dutch Grand Prix. It was kind of a chaotic one, but genuinely the most unpredictable and entertaining one, I have to say. It was really engaging, and usually free practice sessions are not something that is hugely entertaining, but the Dutch Grand Prix definitely made even the free practice sessions really entertaining to watch. I would definitely give the Dutch Grand Prix a solid 9 out of 10. It was a brilliant weekend. Enjoy the racing with the teams playing for positions. So yes, let me know in the comments on what you thought about the Dutch Grand Prix, what you thought about the weather, what you thought about the team strategies, and I'm excited to know your perspective on it as well. So with that being said, I would like to wrap up this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe to the Autobahncast YouTube channel if you haven't already. Also hit the bell icon and turn on all notifications so you get notified whenever I upload a brand new video. It's me, your boy Autobahncast, aka Vinesh, and I'm out. Love you guys, stay safe, peace.